We are studying this fall how John dramatizes the fact that Jesus is the Word who was with God and who was God. And we are following that theme throughout the entire Gospel of John, and we will follow another theme in the spring through this Gospel, that Jesus is the light of the world. And so we will proceed through the Gospel that way. But as we have seen this theme growing in this Gospel, that Jesus is God himself, made flesh. As we have watched this theme developing, there has also been developing a reaction against that theme, a reaction of murder that the Jewish leaders and many in the crowds that follow Jesus wanted to kill him. And this threat goes all the way back in John to chapter 5, verse 18. That's one of the first indications we have that they are intent on killing Jesus. We saw a couple of weeks ago in chapter 8 that they actually got as far as picking up stones to hurl at him. And you know that these are not little rocks, these are big boulders. And the intent was not to hurt him, the intent was to kill him, to crush him to death. And you know that last week in chapter 10, they did it again. They picked up stones to stone him. And so on the heels of that, we see in chapter 10, verse 40, that Jesus actually left Judea and went away across the Jordan to where John the Baptist had been baptizing at first. And so Jesus stays there. He's ministering and baptizing there. And many people go out to him. They leave, just as they did with John the Baptist, they leave the urban, civilized places, and they go out to the wilderness to hear Jesus teach and to be baptized by his apostles. Now, the strain of this is beginning to tell on the apostles. We are looking at chapter 11 this morning, and this reaction against Jesus' claim, my Father and I are one. I do the works of my Father. I preach the words of my Father. Everything that I do comes from him, and he is my Father. I am the Word made flesh. The reaction against that claim is, we'll take care of that. We'll kill you. And we'll show you just how much you are the Word made flesh. You are not at all God made flesh. You are just a man. And so as this reply has built, the disciples are wilting under this, as any of us would. And we see this in the beginning of John chapter 11. Jesus receives word that one of his close friends, Lazarus, is sick. And his sisters, Mary and Martha, well known to us in the other Gospels, his sisters send him word, he is very ill, and we think he's going to die. And so as he receives this word, Jesus has an interaction with his disciples that really shows where the disciples are at this point, under the strain of the threat of death. Verse 4, Jesus says, this illness is not going to lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And so Jesus does a strange thing. I want you to look at verse 5 and the connecting word with verse 6. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. He loved them. So he receives word that Lazarus is sick, that he's about to die, and you would think that the one who has healed so many, because he loved these three, that he would make immediately the journey back to Bethany and heal Lazarus before he dies. You would think. But I want you to look at the connecting word in verse 6. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So, in other words, because he loved them, when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Because he loved them, he did not journey to Bethany. Now, that can be very hard for us to process. I think you see the point of this. That because Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he did not go to Lazarus when he was sick. He did not heal Lazarus when he was sick. He did not raise him up. He allowed Lazarus to die. Furthermore, he allowed Mary and Martha and all the rest of that community to go through that loss, to mourn it, to be torn up by it. He allowed all of that. He stayed where he was for 2 days, and John says it was because he loved them. Now, we don't like that at all. In fact, I only noticed this morning. Maybe I've seen it before, but it hit me this morning that it was because he loved them that he stayed 2 days longer. And we would prefer, frankly, to just skip that verse and not think about it. So instead, we're actually going to dwell on this morning. The reality that God, and specifically the Lord Jesus Christ, is pushing us in our pain, suffering, and loss. He is with us. His power is at work for us, but he is allowing things in our lives that he allows because he loves us. So we're going to see how this works out in this story. The disciples, under the strain of the threat of death, they're not tracking with him. Verse 7. After he stayed 2 days, he says to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." So we're safe. We're across the Jordan River. He's not being pursued, hounded day after day by people and crowds who want to kill him. And his disciples raise the obvious point, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going there again? Why go back?" They don't want to go back. Would you? Would you want to go back into a situation where every time you show your head in public, there is the very real possibility that you will be killed? I wouldn't. I don't like that. I don't like the grind I'm in, and it's nowhere near what they're facing here. So they say, "What are you talking about? Going back to Bethany?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." Jesus rolls out this metaphor that he is the light, and so he should go there and shine light in the darkness of Judea. And they don't track with this. After saying these things, verse 11, he says to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I go to awaken him." At the safe distance of Ithaca, New York in 2025, we're tracking with Jesus. This is a metaphor. Lazarus has fallen asleep. He has died, so Jesus is going to go raise him up, because we've heard this story before. But when they're in the story, under the strain, Jesus says Lazarus has fallen asleep. They're not tracking with him. The disciples said to him, verse 12, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. He'll get better. That's what he needs. And Jesus finally breaks out and tells them plainly, Lazarus has died, verse 14. And for your sake, watch this, for your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So here he's saying, for your sake, because I love you and I want you to flourish, I'm glad that I wasn't there. So we've already seen, because he loved Lazarus, Mary and Martha, he didn't go. He didn't raise up Lazarus. Now he's telling his disciples, I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there, because all of you are going to see something that you would not have seen otherwise. I love this, verse 16. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. He was a philosophy major, Thomas. Well, maybe this will give some meaning to our lives. Who knows? So there's this sense of resignation among the disciples. As you can almost see them trudging along behind him, having lost the thread of what he's doing and having lost the heart of why he's doing it. They're just following along, putting one foot in front of the other, and not able to keep up with what he's teaching. So let's talk about all of these doubts that are plaguing the disciples, and by now plaguing Mary and Martha under the strain of all of this death. The first thing we learn when Jesus gets to Bethany is how real the danger is in his going there. Now, when Jesus came, verse 17, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So you've got Bethany just very close to Jerusalem, where Jesus has been repeatedly under assault and where his life has been threatened multiple times. And now a whole crowd of those Jews from Jerusalem is in Bethany because of the death of Lazarus. So here comes Jesus right back into the threat of death that he had escaped in the previous chapter and in previous circumstances. So it's kind of like Jesus walking into death. It's like Jesus walking straight toward his killers, and his killers basically saying about him and to him, you are not the Word who was with God and who was God. You are not the creator of all things. We'll prove it. We'll kill you. So the first person we're going to deal with here as Jesus arrives in Bethany is Martha. Martha, verse 20, heard that Jesus was coming. She went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. What a powerful moment this is. Because we know from the previously written Gospels that you've got Mary and Martha. Mary very attentive to the teaching of Jesus, and she is the one who displays this attachment to him, and she's remaining in the house. Martha's the one who goes. And so Martha said to Jesus, verse 21, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you know what this feels like, you know how deep this goes. If you know what this feels like, you have said this to the Lord in prayer. Why did you stay away? Why didn't you come? Why didn't we see your power? Why did you let this happen? My brother's dead, and you could have saved him. What's wrong with this picture? Well, the whole assumption on his disciples' part, on Mary and Martha's part, is that Jesus has to leave the region beyond the Jordan and come to Bethany and get close within hand's reach distance of Lazarus before he can heal him. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. The fact is that Jesus has already done many miracles off-site, where he says, oh, don't worry about your child will live. And he heals a centurion's servant off-site. And in fact, the centurion says to him, don't come to my house. You don't even need to. All you need to do is say the word. You have the authority to do this. And Jesus says, and here we see why he said it, I have not seen so much faith in Israel. And here you are, a Roman, and you get it. You get who I am. My own people don't get who I am. So that's one thing that's wrong with this picture. Martha gets a lot, but she doesn't quite put it together who Jesus is. And so there's doubt here beyond just the natural grief of losing your brother. So, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Does she understand who Jesus is? She gets a lot. Probably, if you had asked her, is Jesus the Word who was with God and who was God from the beginning, she would probably say yes. And she knows that he is close to God, but there's something missing here, and there's a doubt here about who Jesus is, or at least an unbelief about who he is. So Jesus challenges her, and this is the part I want you to pay close attention to. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. I love and hate this about Jesus. He's always throwing things out there to see how we react. And so he throws it out there, Martha, he will rise again. And she reacts to this in this way. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day, but I don't have him right now, is what she's saying. I'm missing him right now. I know he'll rise again eventually, whenever that day comes. And then Jesus says this, verse 25, Ego eimi, I am the resurrection and the life. We might think that the right way to describe this is Jesus is saying he is the resurrection and the life. He's saying so much more than that. He's saying, Yahweh, I am, is my name. That's who I am. That's what you call me when you're taking your shoes off at the burning bush. That's who I am. I am the resurrection and the life. In other words, if I show up, there's life. If I appear here, there is resurrection, and death is defeated. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? So he challenges her very specifically. Do you understand who I am? Do you know my name? And she says, clarifying, probably to herself and to Jesus, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Now her language changes, and she approaches this from heaven's point of view, from the point of view of the Word who was with God and who was God. And she says, yes, I know who you are. So that's Martha. John said, because Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he stayed away 2 days, which means that he allowed Lazarus to die so that he would have this conversation with Martha. Do you know that the things that God allows in our lives, the losses, the humiliations, the grievous things where we confront him, if you had showed up, this wouldn't have happened. He allows those things so that he can confront us with what we still yet need to put together as his disciples. He does it because he loves us. Next up is Mary. Let me check if we have some questions here. Why did Jesus say to his disciples, Lazarus has fallen asleep, when he knew they wouldn't understand? It seems a little like cruel to play with the power that he has, because it is clear the disciples don't really understand in the moment, and Jesus had to clarify the answer. So why does he do this? Well, one part of the answer is he does it a lot. One of the most amazing things about Jesus is his willingness to say things that in the moment he knows will not be understood. And he does it all the time, which means that Jesus is part of his method of discipleship is planting things in people's lives that they will remember later. In fact, John says this. In John chapter 2, he gives an example of this when he says, Jesus said, tear down this temple, and in 3 days I will rebuild it. He was speaking of his own body, his own coming resurrection. And John makes the comment there, his disciples remembered that he had said this. Were they going to understand it at the time? No. They remembered it later. Jesus is constantly doing this. It's one of the reasons why we are called as God's people to read our Bibles over and over and over again. I'm at the place now where I read my Bible and it's like, what was I thinking? Of course, it's right there. I've read this before. It's calling back to mind a truth I have forgotten, and now I see why I needed it. See, these are some of the realities. It's not cruelty. It's a method of dealing with us. And one of the things I would say about this is that if you are having trouble with some truth of the Scripture and you're saying, I don't know how to embrace this. I don't know what to do with this. The reality is, Jesus has put that there so that over the course of your life, maybe a year, maybe 10 years, maybe 50 years, this thing will work on you, and you will change, and you will adapt, and you will perhaps repent, perhaps be comforted. There are things that he plants for that purpose. But what this is all saying is we are in process, and the process is long. Let's press ahead and look at another element of this process, and that's Mary, verse 28 of John 11. When she had said this, Martha, went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here, and he is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet come into the village. So he's outside the village. He's out where the graves are. He's not in Bethany. So Martha goes back into Bethany, tells Mary. Mary stands up and hightails it out of town. It's not very far, but she's leaving the village. So verse 31, when the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. So what's happening here? Death is standing up and following Mary to Jesus. The threat of death, execution, stoning, all of that hostility, all of it is following Mary out of town to go meet Jesus. That's how dangerous this is. And again, this is that mixture of people, some of whom are sort of entertaining the idea that Jesus may be the Christ, many of whom are saying, "You are not the Son of God at all, and we'll prove it to you, we'll kill you." Those people. So, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Exact same words that Martha said. So Martha says it, and Jesus responds one way, challenging her, saying, "Do you know who I am? Do you know my name? Do you believe that I am the Christ, the Word, that I have this authority?" And Martha resolves something and says, "Yes, I believe." Mary says this, and Jesus' response is different. Look with me at verse 33. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All life was created through him. No life was ever created except through him. The Word became flesh. What John is showing us here is the human reaction of the Word to death. It's personal. There's something about the reaction, the impact of death on the people you love that makes the evil of death come home. It moves us. It grieves us. There's a photograph of my grandfather taken in a family portrait with his father, my great-grandfather, and his sisters and his little brother, who was an infant. And the person who is not in that photograph had just died of TB, his mother. Grandpa was 8 years old. The whole family just looks lost. And the first time I saw that picture of Grandpa when he was 8 years old, just, who knows, a couple of months, even days after his mother had died. The first time I saw that picture, it just stunned me, because the look on his 8-year-old face, just a kind of lost look, was one that he had throughout his life. And you could see it at moments as if he was 8 years old when he was 80 years old. So it's when you see the blast of death hit someone you love that you realize what this is. The evil of it, the darkness of it, and the tyranny of it under which we live. And Jesus realized it as a man. So this is not theoretical to him, even though he knows that he is the resurrection and the life. It does not stop him weeping at the tomb. And shouldn't stop us weeping at the tomb either. This series of interactions just shows us how much of human experience Jesus takes in. Martha needs something from Jesus. Mary needs something different. Same event, same family. And so Jesus is giving different things to each of these individuals. And so I want you to notice the reaction of the crowd to this. Verse 36. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" So they refer to the most recent miracle, the healing of the man born blind in Jerusalem at the gates of the temple in John chapter 9. The miracle that almost gets him stoned in John chapter 10, and the debate that follows. So they refer to that. It's fresh in everyone's mind. And so the unbelievers in that crowd are saying, he did this, but he can't do this. Typical crowd reaction. This is something about the nature of unbelief is very stark here. Faith commits without experience. Unbelief steps back, withholds until it sees experience. We'll talk about that more in a moment. The third person who Jesus interacts with is obviously Lazarus. Verse 38. Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead 4 days." One of the great moments of the King James Version. "Lord, he stinketh." So this is reasonable. Don't open that thing up. He's gone. What are you really going to do? In other words, Martha has resolved some things, but there's more yet. So Jesus, verse 40, said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Lazarus, come forth." Is that what you read? No, he had something else to say first. He had a demonstration to make. The demonstration is, "I am the Word who was with God in the beginning and who is God, the creator of all things, and my Father and I, we are one." He wanted to demonstrate this in real time to his disciples and to the unbelievers. So he lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." That's the gospel in John. The Father sent his only begotten Son. He gave him, and he loved the world in this way, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. So he says, "Father, I'm going to pray to you right now. I'm going to give you credit for this thing that's about to happen so that everyone standing around here will believe it." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." You have an image on the front of the bulletin by Lucas van Leyden. The more I see of his drawings, the more insightful I think he is. There's a line that this composition forms from the upper right-hand corner of the image straight down to Lazarus. The line is made by faces and people pointing, and this is reinforced by most of the faces in this composition, most of them looking at Lazarus, except for two in the foreground. Jesus is looking up. He's looking to his Father, not at Lazarus. I take it that we have Mary and Martha in the foreground, one of them bowing her head in prayer, the other looking at Jesus. So it's a very insightful capture of this whole plot. Let's draw some conclusions about this as we talk about faith. Oh boy, a bunch of questions came in. Let's see how many I can get through here. Somebody commenting, "I feel bad for Martha. Why is Mary always such a goody two-shoes?" Well, that is a function of lazy preaching, frankly. We do turn Mary and Martha into two-dimensional cardboard cutout figures. You know that Martha is always the busy person who's cooking food and doing stuff that, and Mary's the good one. She's at Jesus' feet. I actually think this story shows the inner depths of Martha, shows her as a relational person, fills out her character more. And it shows Mary had a kind of a spiteful streak, and that she needed to get up and go see Jesus, as we often do. It is possible that Jesus used the word sleeping to describe Lazarus' death, to try to soften news of his death. It's possible that Jesus was foreshadowing what would soon happen to Lazarus, that he would awaken. What Jesus starts here is a use of a sleep that Christians began to take up in the New Testament to say exactly this. We've fallen asleep, we will awaken again one day. I don't think Jesus is doing this to soften the blow. He's doing it to instruct. So let's talk about faith. John has been toying with this word. He's been saying that people believe, but then they turn on Jesus. So how can they believe if they turn on him? There's something wrong with that. There's a kind of belief that isn't deep, it isn't genuine, it isn't real. So that raises the question, the more John toys with this word and the more John shows us Jesus debating with his own disciples who claim to believe in him, the more he shows us this, it raises the question, what is faith then? What is the real thing? And when we watch Jesus in action in this chapter and throughout the Gospels, I think something becomes really clear. Faith is the judgment call that what God says is true before you receive it. Let me repeat that. Faith is the judgment call. It's not a feeling. It's not an intuition. It's an act of your reason. You've encountered the character of God. You've experienced some things about God, and you make the judgment call. What God says is true. He has made these promises to me and to all people. So if he said them, I will put my confidence in them even when I don't have the full fruits of those promises. Even when my hands are still empty, I'm going to believe those promises. You can contrast this with unbelief, which is constantly saying, well, I don't have it yet. I don't have the answer to my prayer. I don't have the thing you promised. I'm still living in all of this trouble. I haven't got it yet. So show me that what you say is true. The reality of faith is that it is an active choice that we are called to make on the basis of good reasons. It is not a momentary flash of intuition that you hang on to because it helped you in a particular moment. It's a judgment call that you make, and you say, I am committing to this, and I will see the good because God is true. That's why he deals with Martha this way. He's saying, come on, say it. Put this together, Martha. Don't leave this fuzzy in your mind. Before I do this, you come to the conclusion that I am the Son of God and that I have been sent into this world by my Father. And so he deals with her this way. The crowd is not even at that stage yet, but Jesus is still working with them. And he says, Father, Show them what you do. And he shows them that he has, as a man, faith in his Father, that he will receive what God has promised to him, even in the moment when he doesn't have it yet. Lazarus is still dead in the tomb, and Jesus says, Father, I know what you're going to do. I'm going to give you the credit for it. Lazarus, come forth. And he does. So he is constantly pushing, constantly helping us arrive at these conclusions. Jesus delays in our lives because he loves us. And he wants us to believe. And that is his purpose and method in dealing with us in this way. Final question. I understand the point that Jesus would fulfill his big picture plan through our experiences, but does that mean that God has planned and determined everything that has happened, including all the details of history and personal life? How are we to understand that in light of free will? So that's like 75 sermons. But I can give you the Cliff Notes version. How do you reconcile God's plan with free will? He lets out bits and pieces of his plan in advance. And you are called to say, okay, I haven't seen the next stage. I don't have it in my hot little hands. But I trust him. I believe it. And I will stand on that. That is the exercise of free will that we are all called to make repeatedly throughout our lives.